7:15, so in 6 minutes, just to allow the stragglers to come in and get a seat, because apparently there's quite a walk. What's that? Speaking to the mic? Mic check. Mic check. Good? Right on. Good evening, everyone. Get all this quiet down for a sec. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to an event full of information and solution for a new Alberta, proudly brought to you by the Alberta Prosperity Project. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Glover Jackson, and I'll be your MC for tonight. I am a proud veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces, and I am here tonight. I'm getting some sweet feedback, man. right? That's what it feels like, time travel. One sec while our technical supervisor, we good? Sweet, now we're good. Okay. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Glover Jackson, and I'm a proud veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces, and I am here. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm here because I want to secure a better future for my 2 young children. So I am proud to stand here before you, not just as a supporter of this project, but as someone who is deeply passionate about our mission to achieve a referendum for an Alberta independence and prosperity. Now, before we begin, I'd like to go over some housekeeping items. I'd like to give a special thanks to Tasha and Tony of the Slovenian Canadian Association for letting us use this beautiful venue. Bathrooms are located at the rear of the room through the exit door, and emergency exits are located on your right and to the rear of the room. We have a merchandise and membership table located at the rear of the room. We encourage you to visit and learn how you can support our movement further. Hence, every voice, every action, and every Albertan supporter is vital to our mission. Now, for those of you interested in asking a question, please complete the question cards, which are located in the rear right of the room. Have them completed and submitted before the end of the presentations and place them in the little tiny silver bag. Now, there'll be no questions during the presentation, and we kindly ask for no disruptions. We're here for respectful discussion and learning. If disruptions do occur, we reserve the right to ask individuals to leave, and in all fairness to you, our guests, and to our presenters. About the Alberta Prosperity Project, for those of you who are new to our movement, I will read the following mission statement. The Alberta Prosperity Project is a nonpartisan, nonprofit educational society. Our mission is to educate, inspire, and advocate to all Albertans about the benefits of freedom and prosperity through independence. This movement began in May 2021 at a humble office shop in Nisku, Alberta, where a group of Albertans, tired of ineffective government and constant overreach from a federal government in Ottawa, it was decided the time to act was needed. Out of those humble beginnings, the Alberta Prosperity Project was born, and here we are today continuing their efforts. I'd like to invite Carlos Yolunas to come up to the podium to begin our town hall with a prayer.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we've gathered here today to discuss and counsel about the future of our land, Alberta. At this time, we have burdens upon us that we can individually take, but ultimately we want to make the best decision that be for our children and grandchildren and all generations to come. Please have your Spirit bless this meeting to guide us in our discussions, but to more importantly, help us know what we must do to accomplish thine will. We say this in Jesus' name, amen.
Now, I'd like to welcome our first presenter to the podium, Dr. Dennis Modry. He is a cardio... I'll let the clap sound. He is a cardiothoracic surgeon and critical care specialist who started and directed Western Canada's first heart and lung transplant program. During his 32 years in practice, he also served on the financial committee of successive provincial conservative governments since Premier Getty. He is a founding member and chair of the Alberta Prosperity Project. He is a fiscal conservative, student of the Canadian Constitution, and he is here to speak to us on the benefits of provincial sovereignty. Please welcome Dr. Dennis Modry.
Well, what a great turnout. It's wonderful to see everybody here this evening. Now, before I begin commenting, we're going to show a brief video. And by way of introduction, I just want to say that this video came to us unbeknownst that it was being created by Jim Ferguson, who started an organization called Freedom Train International out of Scotland, which has been trying to galvanize and has been the freedom and prosperity loving people around the world. And he makes the point, and you'll hear it very clearly, that freedom loving people elsewhere are very much in support of what we are doing here and really want us to be successful as an example of what can happen in their own regions. So without further ado, let's start the video. 3, 2, 1.
For the people of Alberta. We stand with you, Alberta. We stand with all the Albertans in this quest for independence and sovereignty. We hope you like it. I want you to know that patriots all around the world are watching Alberta right now. We stand with you. I hope you enjoy this. Just remember,
time we draw the line in the land. We ride sovereign steel through fire, through frost. We ain't the last, we're the line they lost. Alberta stands never on its knees. A nation born in the forge of the free.
Well, what did you think of that? Wasn't that fun? Well, it's wonderful to see so many out tonight, and for your information, we've been circling the province and we've been circling Edmonton as well, but this is the first main event that we've had in Edmonton proper, so give yourself a hand, and thanks so much for being here. Now, before I begin, these events, and we've been going around the province, I think this is our 38th or 40th event in the last 8-9 weeks, and they don't happen just because it's easy. It takes a lot of volunteers to make this work, and what I'd like you all to do is to give a shout out to our many volunteers that help make these events happen. So we've got 3 speakers tonight, and of course I'm starting off, obviously. And so in the interest of time, I want to just remind you of the famous actress Elizabeth Taylor, who once said to her 7th husband, "I won't keep you long." So with that, how many people this evening are here for the first time? They've never been to an APP event before. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay. And how many people here are already on the independence train? Okay, very nice to see. Now, a more important question is how many people here are here for more information and haven't made a decision yet as to whether or not Alberta sovereignty is for them? Wonderful. Well, I'm really glad that you're here this evening, because our whole purpose tonight is to give you information with respect to the rationale and merits of Alberta sovereignty, so that you can make a rational decision as to what you want to happen. It's a little bit like informed consent, if you will. And so we're talking to you tonight about informed consent, and we're going to give you the information on that. So again, by a show of hands, how many people here are pleased with the outcome of the recent federal election? All right. Okay, I'm not surprised to hear that. But you know something? There are some people that are pleased with the result of the recent federal election, and there's 2 interpretations. One is that there's a group of people that really like big government, high taxes, and lots of regulations. And then there are others that knew that if there was a Liberal win in the last federal election, that would stimulate the Alberta sovereignty movement. And that's exactly what's happened. So when you look at the outcome of the recent federal election, and you look at the electoral map, what do you see? You see that Saskatchewan, Alberta, Central and Northern BC didn't vote the way the rest of the country did, right? And that's habitual. That happens almost every federal election, which is determined at the Ontario-Manitoba border, right? And we're not very happy with this outcome, and we're not very happy with what's been happening to us. So the question then is, now we've gone from a Trudeau government, it's our 2nd Trudeau government, to a Carney government. Does anybody feel as though Mr. Carney may be more dangerous than Mr. Trudeau? Well, I agree with that sentiment. And how many of you have read his book, Values? There's a few that have read it? Right. So you know that that in that book there are some important revelations about what his values are. And I'm going to tell you just a few of them, and you can decide for yourself whether or not they align with your values. So one of the things that he stated is that Western civilization is morally rotten, corrupted by capitalism, and capitalism, of course, has lifted more people out of poverty than any other form of governance, and any other thing, and this has led to a climate emergency. All right. So this is what he says, and climate is critical in his mind. But to deal with this climate emergency, he believes that there must be rigid controls on personal freedom, on business, and when he talks about restrictions on business, he is referring to the oil and gas business as well as agriculture, and rigid controls on financial institutions that finance oil and gas and agriculture. And he goes on to say that he does not promise that things will get better for ordinary people. I want you to think about that. Ordinary people. I think we're ordinary people. But what does he think he is then? Something different. So he like I said, he says that life will not necessarily be better for ordinary people. In fact, there will be fewer choices. Less travel, less meat, more inconvenience, and more poverty. And he then goes on to admit that assets will be stranded. This is very much like the outcome of the national energy policy. Assets will be stranded. Businesses will go under. People will lose their homes. That's what he refers to as assets being stranded. There you go. So, on top of that, the issue is then, not just the issue, but he goes on to say that your internal combustion engine vehicles will become unsaleable. And we know that's true because they want to end all combustion diesel and gas engines by 2035. And they want a 20% reduction, I think, by 2027 as well, in terms of the sales. So, how is he going to achieve these objectives? Well, he talks very favorably, building on the Trudeau legacy, of censorship, right? And we do have a couple of censorship bills right now before us. So if it controls the media, then he controls what you and your children can hear, and then you're more persuaded to follow along the lines of what it is he wants to accomplish. And he's very big into ESG, environmental social governance controls. And to force your compliance to those environmental, social, and governance issues, those dictates, what he intends to do is implement a digital ID to track your every movement. And also, he would like to implement a central bank digital currency. So if you thought it was relatively easy for the federal government to freeze the accounts of people who contributed a few dollars to the trucker convoy, it'll be a lot easier with the central bank digital currency. So this is the kind of dystopian future that he is wishing for us. And I'm not sure how many people here would buy into that kind of a future, but this is the kind of thing that is coming. More and more control, fewer and fewer freedoms. And so, on top of that, in order to create in perpetuity a liberal, socialist, Marxist government, what he intends to do is carry on with what Mr. Trudeau has already started, and that is to lower the voting age to 16. All right? So, there's a lot of very bright 16-year-olds, but they haven't got a worldview yet, right? They haven't had enough experiences, I think, personally, that justifies them having the vote at that particular age. Now, on top of that, in order to help hollow out the middle class, what he wants to do is introduce a universal basic income at age 17. So if you're graduating high school, for example, and you think, well, gee, I don't need to get a skill, I don't need to work, I'll get $2,000 a month. Do whatever I want with that $2,000 a month. How does that help generate the next generation of people to handle everything that society requires at a high level? It doesn't. But this is the plan, and Mr. Carney, of course, is a prominent member of the World Economic Forum, a world banker, of course. And this is the kind of thing that he has wanted to create, which, like I said, is a hollowing out of the middle class. So you have an underclass that provides all the services for the elite class, which he defines for himself in that particular circumstance. So what is it that we can do about this? Well, you know, we've had 120 years in Confederation. We've tried to negotiate with the federal government on numerous things. The Premier herself has said, we want 9, she made 9 demands. They were all in the relation to oil and gas, and one was on single-use plastic straws. And then she's made 8 demands through the Alberta Next panel in relation to constitutional changes. Now, given what has happened over time, what is the probability that we're going to be able to negotiate a better deal? Do you think it's possible? No, it's very unlikely. And so when you look at our history and you look at the difficulty, if not the impossibility, of changing the Constitution, the 1982 Constitution Act, the hurdles to change that Constitution virtually make it impossible to move forward in this fashion. So it leaves really only one alternative, and that is to give Alberta the leverage that it requires to deal effectively with the federal government, and that is only one thing, and that's a referendum on Alberta sovereignty. Now, just to touch on that term for a second, everybody understands, I think, ostensibly what sovereignty means, but I want to give it to you or provide some information on that term that you may not have thought of before. So, in simple terms, sovereignty is self-governance, freedom from external interference. It's not a left or a right issue. It's a pragmatic issue. And when I say pragmatic, what I mean is it means freedom from external interference. It means freedom from persecution. And what type of persecution am I talking about? Well, you can ask yourself if you felt any of this. Freedom from the persecution of being over-regulated, overtaxed. Have you felt religious or cultural persecution? Economic persecution, political persecution. So these are the kinds of things that we've been facing for many, many years now. And we finally got to the point where we really have a movement going which can help fix this particular problem. It's been said by many, and I think this is true, if we save Alberta, we may save the rest of Canada. And as Bruce Pardy has said, and Jeff and others have said, the constitutional lawyers, that saving Alberta, saving Canada may just help save other freedom-loving regions in the world where they don't have freedom and prosperity yet. So let's look at sovereignty at the individual level. Okay, so individually, you're sovereign people. When you give up control of your life through excessive regulations, you're giving up some of your sovereignty. I don't know if you ever thought of it that way. When you give up your income through excessive taxation, you're giving up your ability to purchase the goods and services that you want for yourself and your family. You're giving up your sovereignty. What we want to do is give your sovereignty back to you as a result of getting out completely from federal regulation, federal taxation, including provincial taxation, so that instead of the average person being taxed at 48% throughout Canada, that's recent information from the Fraser Institute, we would like your maximal taxation through perhaps a consumption tax to be in the order of 8 to 10%. And I'm not going to get into the details too much, because my friend and colleague, Mr. Jeff Rath, is going to take you through some very important financial information, which you will see gives you the opportunity to chart a better future for yourself and your family and future generations. So let's look at for a moment, how did we get into this situation? where we feel as though we have to have a referendum on Alberta sovereignty, to leave, to get out from under all the persecution that we've been facing and dealing with, ineffectively, I might say. Well, it's because when you go back to September 1, 1905, when Alberta and Saskatchewan were incorporated into Canada, by an individual by the name of Sir Clifford Sifton. He was the Minister of the Interior in the Liberal government of Sir Wilfrid Laurier. And he was responsible for bringing Saskatchewan and Alberta into Confederation, but it's what he said in 1904 that I think is really important for you all to understand. Because it explains why we are where we are at now. So what did he say in 1904 to an audience in Winnipeg? He said these words, "We desire, and all Canadian patriots desire." Now, Canadian patriots in 1904 are the people that were living in the East. So we desire, and all Canadian patriots desire, that the great trade of the prairies is Alberta and Saskatchewan's wealth, that the great trade of the prairies shall go to enrich our people in the East, to build up our factories and our places of work, and in every legitimate way contribute to its prosperity. Did you hear anything about Alberta prosperity or Saskatchewan prosperity in that statement? No. We started off as a colony to serve the interests of the East, and 120 years later, we're still doing it. We're still being pillaged and plundered for our wealth, but we're actually being pillaged and plundered for our efforts, okay? So our efforts are not being rewarded. We work harder than other regions in the country, and we're not able to keep that extra effort that we make. So economically, how does this look? What has happened? Well, since equalization started, the national energy policy, other confiscatory tax policies, regulatory costs, we've given over $800 billion to Ottawa, for which we've not received a cent in return. Think about that. In addition, more recently, we find, as the Premier has pointed out, we lost $500 billion of planned investment over the last several years coming into Alberta. And why did that happen? Because those investments, the people that would make, and businesses that would make those investments couldn't see a business case. And why? Because of federal regulation and taxation. But that $500 billion was invested, but it was just invested in other regions of the world in which they could appreciate a profit for which they could pay their employees and have a little bit left over to expand their businesses. That is a difference. From the Frontier Center for Public Policy a couple of months ago, there was a report that because we can't get our oil and gas to Tidewater, we lose $26.5 billion every year. Now, if you look at the economic growth of all industrialized countries in the world, Canada is dead last. What does that tell you? That tells you that we have a federal governance system that isn't just working for Alberta, it's not working for the rest of the country as well, except from the perspective of the amount of money that we give through equalization and taxation to the federal government, of which, by the way, is in the order of $70 to $75 billion, and we get back about 30. So you can imagine if we're completely out from under federal regulation and taxation, just how much better off we would be to take over all of the federal government services here for less cost, and that excess $40 billion eliminates your personal taxes. So that is a future that is possible. Now, I want to touch on something else. I want to go back to the national energy policy for a second. How many people here were adversely affected by the national energy policy? Anybody? Okay. So you'll remember, for those of you who weren't around then, that in the 70s, Alberta was booming. There were people and businesses from elsewhere in Canada and around the world coming to Alberta. And the reason was liquid gold, oil. All 5 major banks were moving their head offices to Calgary, and one did, CIBC. Now, The national energy policy, of course, when it was implemented in 1980, it was the brainchild of Marc Lalonde, the Minister of Finance in the Pierre Trudeau government. And when asked why did he implement this, he said, "We could not let Alberta become the center of economic power in Canada." But there was something else going on that was quite nefarious in 1980. Can anybody think of what it might have been? It was the Quebec secession referendum. And why that's relevant is because the federal government was very nervous that Quebec was going to leave. And so what did Quebec want? The same thing they want now, more money from the rest of the country, particularly from Alberta. And so now you understand why Quebec gets $2 of every $3 of equalization, and we give about $14 billion of the $26 billion that goes to equalization just from this province. So those who will remember the 1980 national energy policy will also remember what happened after the 1980 national energy policy, where people lost their homes, they lost their businesses, businesses moved out of the province, people committed suicide. It was a mess. Did Ottawa care? Not at all. Do you think Ottawa cares now? You're wrong. They care about Alberta money. That's what they want out of Alberta. And they want more of it. And they're nervous about Alberta becoming a sovereign country because you know why? So does Saskatchewan want to become. They want to come along with us. Now, so where do we go from here now? Okay, so we understand that what sovereignty means, and Jeff is going to put a lot of meat on those bones in terms of the benefits. We understand a little bit about the history. There's never been a movement before that has garnered the kind of attention that this movement for Alberta sovereignty has garnered on an international scale, I might add. The Alberta sovereignty movement right now is the #1 topic of discussion ahead of in Alberta, ahead of the Ukraine-Russian war, ahead of Trump, ahead of healthcare, education, etc. It's the #1 topic occurring right now. So fortunately, there is a solution for us, and you already know what it is, and that's for Alberta to become a sovereign nation. And how do we get there? Well, we get there because there is a legal pathway that has been defined subsequent to the 1995 Quebec secession referendum, which was their second. And that second one missed by less than 1 percentage point. It was very close. The federal government was nervous about this particular movement in Quebec, and they posed the question, does a province have the right unilaterally to declare independence? And they referred that question to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, and that was called the Quebec secession reference. And the Supreme Court did an analysis, which you can read. It's quite interesting to read. And Jeff is a brilliant constitutional lawyer. He got me into that to read it, so I can say something about it, but he can explain it even better than I can. But the point is that from that analysis was born legislation, which is the Clarity Act, which defines the pathway for a province to leave Canada. And it requires 3 main things. One, that there's a clear question in a referendum posed to the public. Number 2, that there be a clear outcome in a democracy that's 50% plus 1, or it should be. And number 3, that there has been demonstrated that discussions have taken place with other interested parties in the province. So that would be other political parties, First Nations, etc., and other organizations. And so, but the interesting thing in all of this is that when you understand the process, it goes like this. So we're in the midst of getting our secession question approved. And we'll get an answer to that on Thursday, but that's this Thursday. But even if even if the court does rule against us, they're not really ruling against us. They're saying, well, we want to hear from other people, interveners, regarding this, okay? So it would delay us by 4 or 5 months in terms of collecting the petition signatures. So the process then is that we have the opportunity to collect 177,000 signatures on a petition to answer the question as to whether or not the people that signed the petition want to see sovereignty. So 177,000 seems like a lot, but you know, we have already registered with the Alberta Prosperity Project some 250,000 or more registrants. By the way, for your information, that's about 5 times as many members as the UCP party has. So after the petition is completed and Elections Alberta has approved or has validated the signatures, then the petition goes to the provincial government, and the provincial government then has an obligation to hold a referendum on sovereignty in which a sovereignty question will be posed to the entire public. And we expect that it will be successful. And that then, for the very first time, gives the provincial government the leverage to negotiate with Ottawa and the other provinces from a position of strength. That's what you will be doing. You will be giving the provincial government a hammer to deal with the federal government and with the other provinces. And the reason is because when you read that Clarity Act, the last line of the 4th paragraph of the preamble states that negotiations, rather that paragraph, I might say, obligates the federal government and the other provinces to negotiate with Alberta, but the last line says, and negotiations might lead to secession. Well, negotiations, I can assure you, will lead to secession. There's no question about it. So there are many questions related to this whole subject of Alberta sovereignty. And I want to close right now. I could talk for hours, literally. My colleagues know, and for people who have listened to me before know that. But I'm going to leave you with 2 questions. And this is a question that I posed to Ralph Klein in 2003 at the annual general meeting in Red Deer. He was a good friend of mine. And for this evening only, I want you all to be Ralph Klein, okay? And I want to hear what your answer is to the 2 questions. Are you ready? Okay. So the first question, Ralph, is related, it goes like this. I said to Ralph, Ralph, you know, I think I have a solution to fix the dysfunctional relationship between Alberta and Ottawa, between you and Chrétien. He said, you do? And I says, yeah, would you like to hear about it? Would you like to hear about it, Ralph? All right. So the question then, Ralph, is if you were the Prime Minister or the President of the sovereign country of Alberta, and Canada came to you and said, we would like Alberta to join Confederation under the current terms and cost of membership, would you? Would you, Ralph? Well, his response was similar. He looked at me and he smiled and he said, to ask the question is to know the answer. Of course not. So I said to him, Ralph, the corollary then is, are you ready for this, Ralph? All right. The corollary is, don't you think you have a moral and ethical and an economic responsibility to Albertans to fix this dysfunctional relationship? And he said, yeah, I guess I do. Would you say the same thing? Right. Well, this is the process to fix this dysfunctional relationship, for Alberta to become a sovereign country. And that gives the Premier and the provincial government, whichever government is in power in Alberta, the leverage to negotiate from a position of strength. To solve this imbalance in power between the federal government and the provincial government. Because now, Premier Smith and her entourage, and by the way, I'm hoping that Jeff and Mitch and I can be part of that negotiating team because we'll be hard, very hard on the negotiations. So, at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, Premier Smith will have this opportunity subsequent to this referendum. And I am hoping that she will say, subsequent to the referendum that is successful, that she can say to the citizens of Alberta, we've just had a referendum, we have a significant plurality in favor of Alberta's sovereignty, and so today I declare Alberta a sovereign nation. All right? Now, it's a little bit more complicated because she could go down the rabbit hole of endless negotiations in which she doesn't get what she wants. But the key to solving this issue, she can do that if she wants, but she also has political legitimacy as a result of other countries acknowledging Alberta's sovereignty. And we know that the United States will acknowledge Alberta as a sovereign country subsequent to that referendum. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention, and we look forward to answering the questions subsequently.
We'd like to thank Dr. Modry for his informative presentation. Thank you, Dr. Modry. Our next presenter I'd like to invite to the podium is Mr. Jeffrey Rath. He's a constitutional lawyer for 34 years experience. He is a leader in his field. Thanks to his expertise and knowledge having been pivotal in representing the First Nations communities and his representation in constitutional law for our Indigenous leaders. He is the General Counsel of the Alberta Prosperity Project Board and is a leader and supporter of Alberta independence. Please welcome Mr. Jeffrey Rath.
What a great turnout. And here I heard Edmonton was full of lefties. It sure doesn't look like it tonight. Where are all these NDP people we've been hearing about that hate sovereignty so much? Don't see any here. Okay. Anyway, I see a lot of husbands and wives out there tonight. That's wonderful. It actually reminds me of a story. It wasn't that far from here. I was at a Ukrainian wedding a few months ago near St. Michael's, and it's a 50th wedding anniversary, and the old guy gets up and he says, people have been asking me how we can have a successful 50-year marriage. He says, I'll tell you right now, day one, I laid down the law. I told her, day one, I'd make all the big decisions, she'd make all the little ones. And he says, the secret to 50 years of successful marriage, I've never had to make a big decision. So for all the wives out there, please guide your husbands and your families into voting yes for independence once we get the ballot up. So what I want to talk to all of you about tonight is the fact that some of the reasons that we need to get Alberta the hell out of Canada. And the first thing that I would say, and I want everybody to truly internalize, Canada and Mark Carney are an existential threat to Albertans. They're an existential threat to Alberta. They don't like us. They do everything they can to make our lives miserable and to destroy our economy and to make everybody in this room's lives harder to live. A perfect example of that is, we only have to go back 4 months to, prior to Carney being elected and Trudeau starting this phony trade war with the United States, right? Anybody that's in business knows that the customer is always right. And if you have one customer that literally, buys 75% or more of all of your produce, right? The stupidest thing you can do is to get into an argument with them over nothing, right? And then when that customer's upset instead of trying to focus on why the customer's upset and trying to repair the relationship, jump up and down and turn red in the face and we're going to retaliate and we're going to get even with you and all these foolish things that we've been watching, right? All these idiots in Ontario, Doug Ford's my favorite, right? Doug Ford turning red in the face and jumping up and down and going, we're going to shut off Alberta oil to the United States. That'll teach them. Of course, poor Doug didn't know where the hell his oil came from. His oil leaves Alberta, goes through Line 5, down to Line 9, and then back up into Ontario through Michigan, right? He had no idea that by cutting off Alberta oil to the United States, he was effectively going to be cutting off Ontario's oil from Alberta, right? I mean, literally, going back to the 80s, Doug Ford was proposing what we'd all thought about at the time, which was let the Eastern bastards freeze in the dark. That's how stupid these people are. And then the gibbering Gibault, who's now our culture minister, but read minister in charge of censoring the internet and the minister in charge of eradicating the free speech of Canadians, that idiot was still the so-called climate change minister at the time. He had no idea there wasn't an east-west pipeline that didn't run through the United States. He was shocked to find out that maybe we in fact did need a pipeline that went from Alberta to Ontario without going through the United States. Notwithstanding the fact that Gibault spent pretty much his entire adult life fighting every single pipeline out of Alberta. He had no clue that there wasn't one that ran from Alberta directly to Ontario. These are the idiots that purport to govern us, right? Think about that. And then my friend Dr. Modry mentioned briefly this whole idea of universal basic income. Well, they say Alberta doesn't have Quebec says, Alberta can't be separate. It doesn't have its own culture. It's like, yeah, Quebec, calm down. There's a lot more to life than poutine, right? Alberta does have a culture. Our culture involves getting up early in the morning, working really hard to take care of your family, right? Earning your own living, not looking for handouts, and more than anything else, wanting government to stay the hell out of our lives. That's the culture of Alberta. But what the Liberals propose to do, and again, this is why I say Mark Carney is an existential threat to the province of Alberta and the culture of Alberta, they want to bring in universal basic income, which means, as Dennis said, first thing they're going to do, the companion bill to the UBI bill, is a bill to amend the Canada Elections Act to lower the voting age to 16. Well, why is that, right? It's because every 16-year-old who votes Liberal will have it through their head. All I have to do is vote Liberal, and the day I turn 17, I can drop out of high school. I don't have to have a job. I don't have to go to school. I don't have to have a plan to get a job. I don't have to have a plan to go to school or better myself as a human being. And the government's going to give me $2,000 a month to sit around the house, smoke legal marijuana, and play video games, right? So how the hell is our province going to move forward, and how are we going to prosper moving forward when that is the Liberal plan for the future workforce of the province of Alberta, right? And of course their answer is, oh, well, don't worry about that. We'll turn all your kids into dope fiends and give them all $2,000 a month. And we'll replace everybody in your workforce with temporary foreign worker visas. Because God knows we don't want you or your kids working, because we want all of your houses to go into foreclosure so that Brookfield and BlackRock can buy them all up. right? This is the future that they have planned for us. The other thing I want everybody to focus on is Mark Carney's so-called energy corridor and the energy future he has planned for us. Notice when he says energy corridor, it's not pipeline corridor. It's now we're almost 3.5 or 4 months into Danielle Smith's courtship of Mark Carney within the 6 months that she's expecting results. There's no promise of a new pipeline. There's no promise of increased oil exports from Alberta. It's just a lot of talk with nothing being accomplished, right? And all we hear about is them actually putting shovels in the ground to start building Mark Carney's $50 billion carbon-sucking machine in the middle of the tar sands to suck CO2 out of the air that we would otherwise need for our plants and our forests and our crops and everything else, turn it into liquid CO2, and then the only pipeline, trust me, the only pipeline we're going to get is this liquid CO2 pipeline that runs from the heart of the oil sands to Mitch Sylvestre's backyard near Bonnyville, where they're going to put this CO2 back into the ground. That's the idiocy with which we are being governed, right? Our tax dollars are going to pay for that. $50 billion, right? Think about that. Also, in the context of this phony trade war, remember what happened when the president of Germany and the prime minister of Japan came to Canada looking to strike deals with regard to Alberta liquid natural gas. There's Trudeau going, oh no, there's no business case for that. Mark Carney told me there's no business case for that. There's no business case for liquid natural gas. Well, what happened like 3 weeks ago? Donald Trump struck a massive trade deal with Japan and Germany almost in the same week, and then President Trump, proudly announced 2 massive liquid natural gas deals for $750 billion US with Japan and Germany. These deals that we had no business case for. So in effect, Trudeau and Carney, right, because keep in mind, everything that Trudeau did and said economically was basically Carney with his hand up his backside making his mouth move like a stupid puppet. Unfortunately, I think Trudeau probably liked that too much, but anyway. But, Trudeau having his mouth move like a puppet with Carney telling him everything to do economically. Does everybody remember when Trudeau's big answer to climate change was for everybody to stop having natural gas furnaces and oil furnaces and furnaces that actually work in a Canadian winter, and that everybody was going to have them replaced with heat pumps, and there's going to be government subsidies for heat pumps to be provided to everybody? 2 problems. First is, anybody who knows anything about heat pumps, they don't work below -5 degrees Celsius, right? They also take massive amounts of electricity to run, right? So I don't know how many people here remember, what was it, 2 years ago, it was January of 2024, when it hit -50 in this province and the entire Alberta power grid almost crashed because we didn't have enough electricity at -50 to keep the province moving. Well, what do you think is going to happen if everybody converts to heat pumps? First of all, they're not going to work at -50. Second of all, we're going to have people freezing to death all over the province, which I'm sure people in Ottawa don't really care about, right? And third of all, our power grid simply can't handle it. It's the same thing with the idiocy that is going to come into effect next year. Next year, Carney's plan is to bankrupt probably 80% of the car dealerships in the province of Alberta. Because everybody thinks that these EV mandates and the rest of this foolishness that they have planned, they're not going to do that until 2035. No, 2026, it is mandated by the federal government that every car dealership in Alberta is going to have at least 20% of its new car inventory in EVs, right? So, A, the car dealerships can't afford them. B, nobody wants to buy them, right? So in effect, all of these car dealerships, most of them are on relatively tight margins, right? Are going to be forced to purchase and carry 20% of their inventory in vehicles that nobody wants. And the reason that nobody wants them, as we all know, they're simply impractical for anybody that lives and works outside of urban areas in the province of Alberta, right? You can't get a Ford, F-150 Lightning to go more than 100 kilometers on a minus 40 degree day. Electric vehicles, forget about the lack of battery capacity and the fact that their battery efficiency reduces by 40 or 50% on a minus 50 day. Anybody that knows anything about electricity, what is it that requires the most electricity on a minus 40 day in an electric vehicle? Your heater, right? So, Carney's plan for the future of Alberta is to have Albertans stuck all over the roads with these electric vehicles that don't work, freezing to death at the side of the road. I mean, that's the Liberal vision of the future of Alberta and the future that they envision for our children, but they don't actually see us freezing to death at the side of the road, because much like COVID, they would just like everybody to stay home. They don't want people to work. They don't want people earning a living. Heaven forbid you're involved in producing that filthy oil and gas that they want to legally mandate to keep in the ground, because we know that nobody else in the world except Japan, Germany, all of Europe, nobody wants it according to the Liberals. Strange that everybody's fighting to get it from everywhere else, but oh no, can't have it from Alberta as long as Carney's in power, right? And then keep in mind why they're doing all of this. It's not because they believe any of this climate change nonsense that they're spewing. Like, if anybody can remember this, today or tonight or tomorrow, if you've got kids that are interested in this stuff, it's very easy to find online. There's a Princeton climate professor by the name of Professor Happer, and there's a 45-minute presentation on YouTube where this Princeton professor, who's an actual climate physicist, who was involved in the Star Wars defense program under Reagan, and he's the guy that actually figured out how the atmosphere works in terms of being able to pulse and modulate lasers through the atmosphere, so they could actually shoot lasers into near space and shoot down ballistic missiles. So the guy kind of understands the makeup of the climate, or the makeup of the atmosphere, and how CO2 and other gases work in conjunction with one another in the atmosphere. And what Happer actually proves scientifically is that this entire 440 parts per million line that they've drawn in the sand, that all life on Earth is going to end after 440 parts per million of CO2, he proves that it's a complete nonsense. And in fact, the planet is on the verge of carbon starvation, and that we're at some of the lowest CO2 levels on the planet in terms of the geologic history of the planet Earth. And the other thing that he shows and demonstrates using actual science and actual mathematics and physics and so on, is that he demonstrates that you could even double the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere to 880 parts per million, right? And guess how much global temperatures would increase? Not even 1 degree, 1%. So 0.01 degree potentially, but so small that it would be immeasurable. So all of us have been the subject of one of the greatest cons that has ever been perpetrated in human history. Specifically, and we see it every day, right? Think about the ancient Aztecs and the ancient Mayans, right? On top of their pyramids with obsidian knives, cutting out the hearts of working men and women in the hopes that that would change the weather, right? We're dealing with the same level of stupidity with Mark Carney and the Liberals in Ottawa. They literally believe that by taxing working men and women to death, they are going to change the weather. Think about that for a minute. I mean, it's a level of idiocy and magical thinking that has no place in government, yet our entire Canadian government is structured around these moronic, scientifically unsound ideas. Right? So some of you may not be aware of this, but shortly before Theresa Tam left office as the Chief Medical Officer for Canada, Theresa Tam was the one in charge of the whole COVID vaccine fraud, the lockdown frauds, all of those things, right? So you know that those bureaucrats hate not having emergency powers, right? So before she left office, she actually declared a new public health emergency. Because as we know, nothing will allow government to lock us all in our homes and tell us what to do more than some sort of public health emergency. Well, the new public health emergency declared by Theresa Tam is, you got it, it's a climate change public health emergency, right? So, and what she said was, and this is fascinating, and this is actually in print in a federal government publication put out by, and I think the name is really great, FAC, right? I spell it with a U, but that's okay. So, put out by FAC, the Public Health Agency of Canada, Theresa Tam actually opines on the greatest causes of climate change in Canada. So for those of you that don't know what the government of Canada thinks the greatest causes of climate change are, right? Ready for this? Capitalism, right? That's in a federal government document. Ableism causes climate change, and big one, heteronormativity causes climate change. So the biggest causes of climate change, according to the Public Health Agency of Canada, and I swear to all of you, I'm not making this up, okay? Capitalism, ableism, and heteronormativity are the greatest drivers of climate change in Canada. So let's think about that for a minute. So all of us wanting to work, have our own businesses, generate income for our family, take care of our kids, take care of our grandkids, create a legacy for future generations, through the economic system that has brought the most freedom and most wealth to the entire world, is a driver of climate change in Canada and needs to be eradicated. Secondly, ableism. Anybody that's able-bodied, that wants to get off their ass and go to work and take care of their family, take care of their kids, etc., as opposed to sitting at home, smoking government marijuana and doing nothing. Heaven forbid you drive a car outside of your 15-minute city that you're going to be locked down in soon, but that's for another day. So, ableism drives climate change. And then finally, heteronormativity. All of those people that want to have children, that want to take care of their grandchildren, all you heteronormal people out there, you're big drivers of climate change, and you all need to be, you need to be eradicated, right? This is coming from the government of Canada. That's why I say that Canada, Ottawa, and Carney are existential threats to the province of Alberta. No doubt about it. The other thing that I'd like to get back to is this whole idea of energy corridors, right? Because again, not pipeline corridors, oh no. Mark Carney wants massive energy corridors to transmit electricity from coast to coast to coast, using small modular nuclear reactors as booster stations along the way to create all of this electricity that we're going to need, right? And think about it, okay, and again, let's get back to the power grid in Alberta for a minute that almost crashed when we had that week of minus 50 in 2024, right? The Alberta power grid puts out roughly 12,000 megawatts of electricity. Might be 13,000 now. It's gone up a little bit in the last year, right, with new capacity. But let's say 13,000 megawatts of electricity. So we have 5 million light cars and trucks on the roads in Alberta, right? And Carney wants them all off the road by 2035, right? And next year, we have to have 20% of all inventory, again, being EVs, right? So let's say within the next 2 years, Carney succeeds in getting just 20% of the gas-powered cars and trucks off the road in Alberta, okay? 20% of the cars and trucks in Alberta is 1 million cars and trucks. 1 million electric cars and trucks require 12,000 megawatts of electricity. In other words, to reach just 1/5 of the stated goals that these idiots have for us for EVs on the roads in Alberta, right? We need to replace the entire Alberta power grid, double it within 2 years. Has anybody here heard of a plan to do that anywhere that's the least bit realistic? Of course not, right? So what happens if we can't meet those targets? Oh, I know, it's just gonna be like Nova Scotia all over again. You're gonna be locked in your homes and told that if you drive without permission, you'll have a $25,000 fine. I mean, that's what these people think is the normal way to operate, right? Oh, do what we say, or we're gonna fine you $25,000. And again, let's get back to the energy corridors for a second, right? Small modular nuclear reactors are gonna power all this stuff, right? Well, guess who the leading company is right now, an investor in small modular nuclear? Brookfield, right? So Carney's vision for the future that he's mandating on every person in this room is that he's going to force you to buy electric vehicles, whether they make any sense for you and your family at all, right? And every time you plug your electric vehicle in, your money is going into a Brookfield owned and controlled power network, right? That literally takes money out of your wallet and out of your family's bank account and siphons it overseas into one of Carney's secret offshore Brookfield bank accounts. This is the country we now live in. And for those of you that have been following this stuff, that's what Bill C-5 was all about. Bill C-5 is this so-called national projects bill, gives Carney the power in the same way that Mussolini had the same power in the 1930s, right? To enter into deals with his favorite companies, exempt them from national law, right? Tender sole source contracts to them. And we all know how well liberals tender sole source contracts. If you thought the corruption under Trudeau was bad, just wait and see what's coming, right? And what's already, which I'm sure is already, been put in place in terms of all of Carney's assets that are offshore and that Brookfield has in all of their offshore bank accounts and all of their offshore subsidiaries that we're not allowed to inquire about, right? That's the future that the Liberals and Mark Carney have planned for Alberta. And the only way out of that is for all of us to come together, understand that these people are an existential threat to ourselves and our families, and to vote Alberta the hell out of Canada. It's the only choice that we have for our future. The good news is that it's a very bright future. At the back of the room, you'll see we have them for sale just to recoup printing costs and allow us to make more of them to sort of spread the word across the province. You'll see copies of this document called The Value of Freedom that we put together. And what this document shows is that Alberta has a very bright economic future. We currently send out of Alberta $70 billion a year to Ottawa in the form of taxes, over contributions to CPP, and over contributions to the unemployment insurance program, right? $70 billion a year leaves the province. We get less than $25 billion a year back in transfers. And what this document shows is if all of that money were to stay in Alberta in year one of independence, right, after funding the startup of an Alberta Armed Forces, right, funding an Alberta Armed Forces on a going forward basis at 3% of GDP on a going forward basis, right? Tripling the amount of money that are spent on Indigenous people in this province that the government of Canada has left in abject poverty, right? And paying for all of the federal services, that we don't think about, but, like airports and customs, immigration, etc., paying for all of the federal services that we currently receive from Ottawa, we would be left with between a $30 to $50 billion a year fiscal surplus in year one. Year one. Which would allow for, at minimum, a 35 to 40% reduction in all of your overall taxes. So no more federal income tax, no more GST, no more capital gains tax. And the biggest thing about voting Alberta the hell out of Canada, and again, this is a huge threat to everybody in this room, the new Liberal plan for all of us is some bright Liberal economist has figured out that the largest store of wealth in Canada is the equity in all of our homes. So the Liberal plan going forward, it's going to be a new form of, effectively capital gains tax, where everybody that owns a home is going to have their house valued every year, much like you do for property tax, and the federal government is going to tax your home equity. Think about that, right? Another reason that we need to get the hell out of Canada. So there'll be no home equity tax, right? No estate tax. All of these taxes that are levied on us by Ottawa will be gone, and Alberta will become the lowest taxed, lowest regulated jurisdiction in North America. Who, under those circumstances, doesn't think that businesses are going to flock here? Right? what corporation or what corporate headquarters would not want to be located in Alberta if if they understood that they would have the lowest taxes and the lowest regulatory burden of any jurisdiction in North America? Anybody suggesting otherwise, like my good friend Jason Kenney, suggesting that somehow or other, oh my goodness, Alberta could never become independent. We'd be very poor and business would be afraid to invest here because businesses really like high taxes and high regulation, right? He makes about as much sense on that point as when the idiot was sitting in Edmonton telling us how many friends we were allowed to have in our houses at Christmas, right? But this is, but those are the people that are on the other side of the argument. All of the deep state bureaucrats that want to lock you up in your home, want to tell you what to do every time you turn around, invoke emergencies left, right, and center because nothing allows people to be controlled like the declaration of a state of emergency, right? Those are the people that are fighting against us. Those are the people that are on the other side of this, right? That we're contesting. We've got little Tommy Nothingburger, right? And I don't know how many of you guys heard that story last week, but some of you may have heard that there's this little guy running around the province by the name of Thomas Lukasik, right? And I heard, actually I had more than one MLA tell me that he was also referred to by his colleagues in the legislature as Little Tommy the Commie, but that's a different story. But anyway, little Tommy Lukasik is running around the province trying to sell people on this stupid referendum question that says, Alberta should remain in Canada, right? Well, when I was in court last week, because the electoral officer filed what I consider to be one of the goofiest applications to a court ever made, specifically suggesting to the court that the mere asking of a question that could lead to constitutional change was unconstitutional, right? That's what we were dealing with. In the context of that court hearing, I brought up the Lukasik petition to the court. And I said, it just demonstrates to me the bias of the deep state bureaucrat that referred this question into the court, because one of the possible answers from the Lukasik position is, do you want to remain in Canada? Well, one of the answers is no. And the judge, of course, said, well, Mr. Rath, you know that question is legally irrelevant. It's not enforceable legally. It's a nothing burger of a question, right? And then the judge, at a couple more instances in the context of that application, went on to comment on how legally irrelevant everything that Lukasik is doing is, right? And of course, that's what we're up against. I mean, we're up against, all of these people that are supported by CBC, supported by the unions, or not the unions, but the union bosses, because most union rank and file supports independence, to be clear. Cops, firefighters, nurses, everybody that wants to see a 40% reduction in their income taxes, right, and the elimination of federal income tax supports independence. So the union workers are with us, but the union bosses, because they know where their bread is buttered, right, support continuing to keep Alberta under the boot of Ottawa so that they can continue to enjoy all of the subsidies and dollars and little goodies that they get handed by the Liberals from time to time, right? That's literally what we're up against. So, that being said, I am confident every day I see rooms like this that are packed with people like yourselves, when I feel the energy of this movement, and I understand that everywhere I go in the province now, I'm seeing more and more and more of the faded Canadian flags left over from the Freedom Convoy coming down, and beautiful, bright, blue, brand new Alberta flags going up on all of the farms and houses and ranches, around Alberta. I see the strength of our movement, and it just gives me more and more and more energy to keep fighting on all of our collective behalfs, on behalf of our children and our grandchildren, which is obviously why we all need to do this. So thank you very much for your time and attention this evening. It's always, always an honor and a pleasure to be able to speak to my fellow Albertans. And just to be clear, even though I live on a ranch in southern Alberta, I have always been an Oilers fan. So better luck next year, but we're going to be cheering for them. So thank you guys. Thank you very much.
I'm not as good at holding the mic as they are. Well, we'd like to thank Mr. Rath for his inspirational presentation. Thank you. As our final presenter, we would like to invite to the podium Mr. Mitch Sylvester. The owner and operator of the Sylvestre Sporting Goods, a well-established store in Bonnyville since 1989. Mr. Sylvester is actively involved in political advocacy. He chairs the Alberta First Pension Plan initiative and is the CEO of the Alberta Prosperity Project. Mitch is an advocate for the people, speaks with honesty and integrity. Please welcome Mr. Mitch Sylvester.
Oh. Okay, too many moving parts, I guess. Well, thank you, everybody. Welcome to Edmonton. I'm really excited. We were expecting a little bit of action here tonight that never materialized. All the keyboard warriors that threatened to come and actually pipe bomb the hall didn't show up. So we're not surprised. However, I have a request of you as CEO. It's an unpleasant request. At this time of the event, we actually put the bucket around so that you can donate to us, because we do not take wages and we need money in order to get in touch and talk to the young people that don't generally come to these events. So our comms team, I'm proud to tell you, will be reaching 100,000 Albertans a day very shortly, because that's our goal, and our open rate is absolutely through the roof. So what we're seeing is a tremendous amount of interest, and what we're also seeing is that we actually can win this. And I really believe we can. So I'll thank you in advance for your generous donation. And the second thing that I have to tell you is that Max wants you to take pictures of those signs because he's live streaming the event tonight, and that's where it's going to be. All right, so I, however, would like to thank my friends for presenting, but I kind of disagree with them on some things, and this is a particular thing that I disagree with them on. I don't think politicians are stupid. I don't think politicians are incompetent. I actually think that they're looting the treasury, and they've been doing it for a very long time. When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in a society, over the course of time, they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. Do you see any of that in Canada? So I'm going to share with you that we are going to talk about money tonight. Money that they're going to take for us, or money that you want to keep for yourselves. And right now, you're in a position, and you may never be in this position again, and I really mean that, to make a decision whether you want them to have it or whether you want to have it yourself for your kids and your grandkids. Because no matter how you slice this, this is going to be the most important political decision anybody in Alberta will ever make, and I honestly believe that we will never get a chance to do it again. So therefore, thank you. Therefore, that's why we are on the road every single night talking to as many of you as we can, because we want to make all of you disciples, and we want you to go out with the information that we're going to give you tonight and talk to your friends and neighbors and children and explain to them how very, very, very serious this actually is. Because as bad as we think it is today, the trend is it's going to get worse. And that's what, you know, the other night we were at an event and somebody says, oh, well, we're not as poor as Bangladesh. I said, well, that's a very low bar. But however, we're headed that way because we just dropped $750 billion contract to Germany and Japan. And if we continue to do that, what's the result of that? The result of that is that we're going to have less jobs, we're going to have less wealth, and that's exactly what they want us to have. So this is the attitude of these people. Who are these people? Does anybody in the room feel happy that Mark Carney's grabbing your money? Is anybody happy that Justin Trudeau What do they make? $300-some thousand a year's net worth is now $425 million. Is anybody happy about that, knowing that that was your money? And they took that money from you and us and our future generations. I'm going to explain to you today how much money they actually did take from us, just so you understand the level of the problem. That's going to be one of my goals here tonight, to make sure that you understand the level of the issues that we're dealing with here. So this is how they think. They do not like us. Like it or don't like it, they treat us like they do not like us. They talk down to us, even in our own province. The Conservatives want the grassroots movement to kind of go away and come back a year before elections and go campaign for them. We saw that with the Bill of Rights at the last AGM. Like, it's very clear. I mean, I was very disappointed, but what they did was they gave us a worse Bill of Rights than we had going in, and they passed it really quickly. Don't ever let them tell you that they can't pass something quickly, because they absolutely can, and we saw it. So Alberta is the richest piece of real estate in the world. There is no other place in the world that has everything we have. We have water, we have minerals, we have oil, we have farming, all manner of things that nobody else can say that they have all of those things. Right? Saudi has lots of oil, but no agriculture, no clean water, all that manner of stuff. And I mean, you can go right down the list. Russia's the closest place to us that has all this kind of stuff, but they have a communist government, so the people are generally very poor. I don't believe the government is very poor, but the people are very poor. And that's the goal. So just in case you thought that this wasn't a real deal on how Alberta is being treated, I'm going to go through a bunch of slides here to show you exactly how bad it really is. So here we got contribution to Ottawa, province by province. Alberta contributes $244 billion in from 2007 to 2022. Now look at the rest of the graph. Now I'll stand out of the road of Quebec, because Quebec is $327 billion that they received, and Alberta gave $244 billion. How many provinces are in the green that give more than they receive? Just the three. And look at the discrepancy between Alberta and everybody else. Is there anyone in the room that believes that Quebec is a have-not province? If you've ever been to Montreal or whole Quebec City, and I have been many times, they're not a have-not province at all. And the reason that this is happening is they also have a culture over there. Their culture is they don't work as hard as us. And that's, my brother played junior hockey in Quebec, and the first thing they did when he pulled up to the doors, they put him on EI. So they had every one of those kids on EI, and they were paying them money, and that was perfectly normal. I was scandalized, actually, to tell you the honest to God truth, because I've never been on EI in my life. And here's what happens with Canada Pension. You also see that line, how much Alberta contributes? All right, now Alberta Pension is a very unique deal. I did 100 town halls on pension. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is you will not lose your pension if we become independent, because you will not lose your Canadian citizenship. You will be able to retain your Canadian citizenship no matter what happens in Alberta. Carney has 2 passports, you can have 2 passports. Okay, so you worked as a Canadian your whole life, you paid into CPP, and you will be entitled to get your CPP. They will not, because there's a portability clause on CPP that you could live in Costa Rica and get your CPP, so you should be able to live in Alberta as well. Understand this, our workers contribute $9 billion a year to CPP. Our seniors collect $6 billion a year. We have a $3 billion differential. The $3 billion differential goes into a pot for Alberta. It's right in the CPP Act. It also says right in the CPP Act that if that's the case, that at any time, Alberta can call back what's in that fund plus interest to start their own pension plan. So according to the LifeWorks report, the federal government today owes Alberta $400 billion. $400 billion, understand that. That's 65 years of pension guaranteed for Alberta seniors if we don't collect another penny or another penny of interest from that fund. Also understand that Alberta is $100 billion in debt. So a $400 billion infusion of cash is going to be a big deal. So why hasn't the Premier called that back? Why hasn't she called that back? Could you imagine how much easier it would be to have a sovereign Alberta if she had just called that back? Like 3 years ago when she was saying that this was a no-brainer? It was a no-brainer. It absolutely is a no-brainer. Is there anybody in the room that understands that this is not a good deal for Alberta? $400 billion comes our way, 65 years of guaranteed pension, plus the interest it generates. That's if the interest on that would be annually is 5 or 6 years of guaranteed pension. Plus, our workers are contributing $9 billion a year. And the reason our workers are contributing $9 billion a year is because we work harder than any other province in the country. So we're punished by the federal government they take our $3 billion, so they're taking Alberta money to do whatever they do with it. EI, we also over-contribute by $2.5 billion to $2 billion a year. So those numbers are numbers that will stay in Alberta. Equalization payments, Quebec is not a province, we've established that. $13.6 billion goes to Quebec annually. This is 25-26, this is 24-25, and you see that doesn't change. And you also see what doesn't change is Alberta doesn't receive any equalization. So do you understand the formula for equalization is that Quebec doesn't get to put their revenue from Hydro-Quebec into the formula, so therefore they can claim the $13.3 billion. That's their biggest industry because it's a green thing. Understand that? They get charged they've got it figured out so they don't have to put that into their balance sheet so that they can collect this $13.3 billion, and since we're an oil-producing province, we have to pay it every year. But yet, we are $100 billion in the hole. So you understand the unfairness of that formula. And you also understand that while we're on the topic, if Mr. Carney wanted to fix this problem of Alberta independence, he could reach out to Alberta and say, hey, let's make it fair, let's give you exactly what Quebec has. It would be done. I'm not saying that I want that to happen, don't get me wrong there. I am just telling you that the will of the people of Alberta to go through all of this, if they gave us, we collect our own taxes, we would, no equalization payments, they wouldn't block our biggest industry, it would be done. But there's no will to do that because they want to take our money. Understand that Confederation is designed to work exactly the way that it is working. They absolutely have this all set up so that they can funnel money from us to them and that we can't do anything about it. And all you have to do is look at the Supreme Court justices by region, and you see Western Canada all the way to Ontario, 2 Supreme Court justices. Ontario's 3, Quebec has 3, and the Maritimes have 1. So, could we win a decision that would favor the West? The other thing that people never or rarely talk about is the fact that these judges have to be bilingual. And understand this. If you're an English-speaking judge or lawyer, you cannot apply to be on the Supreme Court. So you have to come from either Eastern Canada or be, like bilingual like me, so that I can actually get along in French. But the whole thing is that I'm not fluent in French anymore. But the whole thing of it is it's a very large limiting factor. So that bilingual part of Canadian culture was put there to guarantee that those people come from the East for the most part. Justin Trudeau understood that the Senate oversees what's going on in Parliament. So if they want to block something, the Senate can do that. 3/4 of the Senate is appointed on Trudeau's advice as a Quebec senator joins. So 3/4 of the Senate are Liberal. So when Poilievre was going to be elected, and the Lord knows we were all so disappointed he wasn't, they were going to say that he wasn't going to be able to accomplish anything because he wouldn't get it by the Senate. And that's set up exactly that way. How do we change that? Harper didn't change it. Harper had an opportunity to change it, and Harper never built any pipelines. All right, Senate representation by province or territory. Alberta has 6 senators. That's 725 or 750,000 people per senator. New Brunswick, on the other hand, has 10, and they only have to have 100,000 people per senator. And that's the entire way it works through. Newfoundland has 6. They have the same number of us as us, and they have a fraction of our population. How is that fair? And that is the way Confederation is designed. It is designed so that they can block whatever comes from the West. So basically, go back to my slide, screw the West, and we'll take the rest, and the government is designed to do that. How far will this government go to protect itself? Representation in Parliament. Maritime provinces, 2.46 million people, they have 32 seats. We have 4.4, we have 37 seats. Again, okay, so here's the solution. This is my group that I took to the AGM last year. We can no longer watch this happen. If we watch this happen, and I'm going to share with you this. 3 or 4 years ago, I had never had anything to do with politics. I had never spoken in public. I had never done any of that kind of stuff. The reason I got involved with politics is I got involved with politics during COVID, because I could see how unfair it was, and it was unfair to my people that lived in my area. We can no longer sit and watch this happen. We have to go to the AGM and represent freedom people and people that want an independent Alberta, because they are the people that are in power and can make those decisions. For $169, you can go to the AGM at the end of November and represent your views there at the AGM and make sure that the government, which is right now trying very hard to get freedom people off of the UCP provincial board. So if we allow that to happen, just say, for example, that we win the referendum, and for some reason the UCP government decides that they don't want to put that into action. What then? So why would we not be sure that we participate? I would like 4,000 or 5,000 of us to show up at the AGM and make sure that you get to vote on the policies that you think are going to be good for you and us and Alberta, and also send a very strong message to the UCP that you exist. All right, now let's look at the last 10 years. If this government can get reelected after the last 10 years, is there a possibility that we could ever elect another Conservative government in this country? There is no possible way. So understand that. So what we're relegated to is going to be a lifetime of Liberal governments. And a very, very sad day every 4 years when they keep getting reelected. So this is the problem, and this is exactly what's happening. Justin Trudeau said this. Now, Justin Trudeau, everybody says, is a buffoon, but Justin Trudeau actually laid the foundation for what's going on here. And he did a very good job of it. He was running under the radar because everybody thought that he was a buffoon. So here's the thing. He said this: there is no core identity, no mainstream in Canada, and consequently that makes us the first post-national state. So what is a post-national state? A post-national state is a state with no national identity. So how is that treasonous, by the way? If a leader of a country says that we should no longer be a country and we should lose our identity. And what does he do? The first thing he did, and the first thing I would do, is in 1954, there was a statute in the Criminal Code of Canada that said it was illegal for media to lie to the public. In 2019, Bill C-39 was voted on and passed into Parliament to remove it. So at that point, it became legal for the press to lie to the people. So what happened there? We no longer have a free press. We have propaganda machines. And that's what's happening. Where's the outrage from the people of Alberta and Canada? He took $700 million. He lit my hair on fire, as you can see. And he's paid media. $700 million he gave these people to spread his message. And it was no longer illegal for them to lie to you. So the people in this room are here because they kind of understand this, but the rest of the people that we're trying to get on board here think it's 2018, and that everything they see on TV is patently true. And that's one of the big things we're fighting. If you told the people on the left side of this that the media is absolutely lying to you with absolutely no consequences, they probably wouldn't believe you. Any tyranny, the first thing they do is control the media, control the information that is going to the people. People try to understand, they say to me, oh, this is not happening here. Ladies and gentlemen, not only is it happening, it's way further down the line than you think it is. This alone is something that the whole world should be against. And not only that, they want to feed you information, but they won't let you talk to each other. This Online Harms Act, this Online Streaming Act, all this stuff is they're stopping you from talking to your friends and other people to get your message out to them. How serious is that? Imagine how serious it is for them to indoctrinate your children. Like, we're all full-grown adults, and a lot of us, are not very long for this world, possibly, but 20 years from now, if they've given this message continuously to these kids are going to believe that that is actually the way things are. They're going to have forgotten the Canada that I grew up in. And that's what we're here for. We're here to come back to that. So now the very concept, this is Trudeau said this is amazing actually that he would say this, but the very concept of a nation founded by European settlers is offensive to me. Old stock white Canadians are an unpleasant relic and quite frankly replaceable, and we will replace them. So what do? They bring 2 million immigrants a year into Canada. This year it's going to be 2.4 million. So what's the point of that? The point of that is to change our politics. Clear and simple. No other explanation for it. It causes everything to get more expensive. And while we're talking about inflation, let's talk about inflation. What happens when they double the supply of money? Prices go up. But I was in Safeway the other day in Prince Rupert, actually. I went fishing, and they had a T-bone steak there. It was $47. $47 for a T-bone steak. So what I'm saying to you is this. They understand the consequences of inflation. That T-bone steak doubled in the last however many years, 2 or 3 years. Did your wages double? So therefore, you're heading down a spiral where your money's not worth as much money as it was before, and they're aware of that. They understand what inflation does. When did they print the most amount of money? Prime Minister Trudeau printed $327 billion during COVID. If you want to understand how much they really dislike you, you should read the Pfizer papers by Naomi Wolf, and our Premier commissioned Alberta's COVID-19 pandemic response. I recommend that to you as well. It recommended reading for everybody in this room. Now, I'm not going to beat COVID to death because I know it's sensitive. However, that doesn't mean it doesn't change the facts. This is Minister Naidu, whatever his name is. He said Alberta government ministers admit COVID restrictions were all about political power and control. We knew when they knew that it didn't stop infection and transmission. They knew that going in. They actually passed legislation, the UCP passed legislation in 2020 or 2021, that they were not going to be responsible for the decisions they made going backwards. I have it on my phone if you want the bill number. So what happened? So Prime Minister Trudeau took away the free press, set the foundation for Mr. Carney to come in and finish the job. Now here's the thing, Thomas Jefferson, now this is not a new thing. This has been going on throughout history. So Thomas Jefferson said that I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies because they control the money. And control of the money is you control everything, basically. And that's what this is all about. Don't ever kid yourself. It's not more complicated than that. They want you to earn money for them so they can live the lifestyle that they want to live. Plain and simple. And they want you to be as poor as you can be so that they can continue to keep them under your thumb, so you have to work harder. What happens when you can't make ends meet? You go work another job. That's what happens. And I know it's depressing, but we have a chance to change that. And that's the thing. That's what we're doing here. We want to change it. Okay. So what we're talking about now is, Dennis went through this, assets will be stranded, used gasoline cars will be unsaleable. But the Carney ultimately wants is a technocratic dictatorship, justified by climate alarmism. So what is a technocratic dictatorship? It is big business running government and running our people. That's what that is. And I will share this with you that is very much happening in our country right now. Why would big business want to run our country? Because they have a monopoly. Monopolies are very good if you're in big business. They don't want, what happened during COVID? How many small businesses did they kill? They really started online shopping, right? And how many mom and pop shops do you think that hurt? Every one of them. And they closed those people down so they couldn't even compete, so they would have to shop online. That wasn't an accident. That is not an accident. Not only that, he's already started limiting your freedoms. He's going to allow, the law allows Carney government to seize and read your mail for up to 60 days and track your online data without a warrant. Now this is what I call the anti-Aboriginal rule. So Carney's demanding power to suspend all federal laws so that he can build pipeline projects or any other project that he wants to do. So if he can fast track them, do you think he's going to consult with Aboriginals? Do you think that's the reason for it? Absolutely, 100%. So the funny thing about this whole thing is the Aboriginals are against this because they think that we're going to take their rights away, while this is happening right under their noses. We won't do that to them. There's absolutely no way. Liberals press ahead with the gas vehicle thing. The boys went into that. I won't do that. That's me talking to the Premier at one of my Premier's dinners. I've had 3 of them. Danielle Smith said, when I became Premier, I thought I would fix everything in 6 or 7 months, but everything is broken. What does that mean? That means that everything is too corrupt to fix. If you are in a position that she is in, she should be able to change anything. So what is the problem? The problem is that she got elected, but all the bureaucrats and all the people below that didn't move. These people are the people that are creating this problem. That is the deep state. That is who the deep state is. These people send memorandums and send bills up to their ministers, and the ministers, if they want to stall them underneath, the ministers have very little that they can do about it. And that is the government that we actually have. And how far will they go to protect themselves? As far as they have to. And that's why it's hard to fix. Now here's the other thing. Let's get into this, and I'm going to call it out for what it is, and I hope it doesn't offend too many people. 103 ethics violations for this Prime Minister in the first 3 months. An ethics violation is a crime. So therefore, Mr. Carney is a criminal. Mr. Trudeau had 83 ethics violations, 83 crimes that he committed, any one of which would have brought down the government before. Any conservative government would not have survived one, never mind 83. So these people are now above the law. So is that what you elected? Is that what you thought was going on out there? There is absolutely no way that you can have 103 ethics violations and still stay in office. Unless you're above the law. So if there's no consequence for these people, what's to stop them from taking all of our money and hurting our people and doing anything? Because they're already in a position where they're like kings. Did we elect kings? So do you think we have a problem? Danielle said we're going to give them 6 months. We're going to see 3 months of that's up. Jeff alluded to this. They turned down this $11 billion refinery because it was going to generate income for 50 years. They are building that carbon-sucking machine that he's talking about, because I know for sure that there's going to be 2 big camps built just outside of Bonnyville, and they're going to take all this oil. They're going to build pipelines. They're not going to take oil. They're going to take CO2 out of the air, and then they're going to pump it in the ground, and you know what it does? It actually increases the production of oil wells. So the oil companies are going to benefit from that, but they're going to get the government to build it as a CO2 sucking machine. So we're going to get into the CO2 thing in a minute. All right, so C293. If you're in this is the city of Edmonton, so this is more of a rural thing, but understand this. The federal government is passing laws right now, back to slide number 3, where I said they're going to do whatever they have to do so they can plunder. So in the case of a next emergency, it gives the government the ability to seize your farm and your herd. That's what C293 is. Why do they do that? How can they even possibly think they could do that? If you worked your whole life and you're on a fourth generation farm, and they decide that whatever emergency that they declare so that they can take all of your rights away from you is something that they would use to take your land away, so that's what they're talking about. By 2030, you will own nothing. Today, the Chinese put a 78% tariff on canola. Today. And they did that because the Canadian government, knowing full well that this was coming, put a 100% tariff on electric vehicles that nobody knows what they are. Oil demand is going up, except here. They're trying to shut us down. Bills that harm Alberta, Bill C-69, blocking pipelines, tanker ban here. This is just after us. They're just affecting us. All right, now I want you to pay attention to this. That's barrels per day by country oil production in the world. So pay attention to this. I want you to pay attention to Norway when it comes, and I want you to pay attention to Canada's number as well. Okay, so Turkey's 83.
Comparison of countries with the highest
"25 years ago, Norway came to Alberta to study their oil patch. Today, Norway has $1.3 trillion in an oil fund. and Alberta has nothing. Did you notice that Norway produces 2 million barrels a day? Canada produces 5.5 million barrels a day? 5.5 million barrels a day, and guess what? 87% of that 5.5 billion is produced here in Alberta. And we are $100,000 in debt, and they have $1.3 trillion in an oil fund. I want to know, where's the money? Do you believe that Alberta can sustain itself? Everybody's saying, oh, we're going to be poor. I don't know how we're going to manage that. $1.3 trillion in an oil fund. Do you know how much interest that is? That's just the interest on that alone is 2 years of our entire provincial budget. 2 years. That's annually. And the other thing I want you to understand is this. We'll do the Nancy Pelosi thing. Nancy Pelosi ended up with $400 or $500 million because they know in advance what the stock market's going to do because they control that kind of spending. They know when stocks are going to go up or stocks are going to go down. So the Americans are going through that right now with the insider trading thing. They're trying to stop it because these politicians are going in and making $170,000 a year, and they're ending up with $500 million after they get out. It costs $8 million a year to run a campaign to become part of a U.S. Senate. But they all get rich. So how is it possible that they're only saying that we're getting 9.9% on our pension fund, our $400 or $500 billion pension fund? They know where to invest that money. They're just saying that's what we're getting. All right, they want to cap oil production. Not only do they want to do that, Danielle Smith said they are sabotaging industry. And that is exactly what they're doing. They're sabotaging our oil industry because our oil is going to stay valuable right where it's at. And when they take control of the whole thing, they will be able to sell it. That $500 billion like Canada, fewer jobs, less growth, and weaker economy is what the result of that is. Here's my favorite slide. The carbon taxes cost Canadians billions of dollars over 5 years, hurting the economy while reducing CO2 emissions by 11.9 gigatons. China emits 11.9 gigatons every day and a half. Okay? Also, you might get a kick out of this. That's why China isn't concerned about it, because they already have a communist government. All right, 100 out of 111 fires in Manitoba are caused by people. 97% of all the carbon that gets put in the atmosphere is natural. Understand this. 97% of all the carbon that's put in the atmosphere is natural. And 100 out of 111 fires are caused by people. That's why they're stopping the people from going to the bush in Nova Scotia, right? Yeah, no, false. All right, here's my next favorite slide, and I'll read through this, and I'll get to the end of it fairly quickly here. We've got carbon tax, personal income tax, corporate income tax, goods and services tax, excise tax, fuel excise tax, alcohol excise duty, tobacco excise duty, cannabis tax, excise duties other than that, custom duties, air travelers tax, luxury tax, provincial tax, capital gains tax, land transfer tax, media tax, regulation tax, CPP tax, business tax, estate tax, and they're going to tax your house. It's paid. Is that a little excessive? We can eliminate all of that. Just understand how serious that is. People don't understand how this tax thing works. They think that if it doesn't come off your check, you don't pay tax. You pay tax every time you buy a bottle of liquor, every time you buy gas, every time you do any of that kind of stuff. We can do better. Pardon me? And after you die, well, estate tax, let's talk about estate tax. What is the rate that you pay on estate tax? 65%. 65%. And you know how they trick you? I went through this with my dad not very long ago. This is how they trick you. After you die, you become a rich person, because the average person that dies in Canada these days has $1.some million worth of wealth. So what they do is, for example, if you paid $200,000 for your home when you bought it, and that it's today worth $700,000, you pay 65% tax on the difference. So you'll pay $335,000 tax on that house based on the 65% tax on the 500,000 differential. Is that reasonable or is that reasonable? That's the way this works. They're talking about a 5% tax annually on your paid-for house. So they will get, if your house is worth $1 million, 5% of that is $50,000. That's $4,500 a month. What do you think? Okay, so let's go back here. In 1950, 50% of married people by 30 years old had a home. Today, that's 12%. We understand that. No, that's not a surprise to anybody. Audit of $187 billion worth of liberal infrastructure spending finds 20,000 missing projects. So what are they, how come nobody's in jail? Because they're above the law. And here's the other part of it. If I was going to be giving money, say, to Iraq, I would say, as Prime Minister of Canada, I would say, I'll give you $1.08 billion, write me a check back for $500,000. What do you think the answer would be? I hear you. Here's my favorite one on this. Trudeau spent $11 billion on overseas gender programs during his tenure. How much of that do you think he got back? Last subject, firearm control. Doug Ford had his house broken into. So he thinks that now that criminals should be shot if they break into your home. That wasn't his stance before he got his house broken into. One of the most important things you can have and that you need in order to have a democracy is you have to be able to defend yourself. Because if people come to your house, and here's the rest of it, the government has to be somewhat afraid of you. Because all power, all political power comes from the barrel of a gun. The Communist Party must command all the guns, that way no guns can ever be used to command the party. That's Mao. And he killed, what, 60, 80 million people after he took their guns? And that's not an isolated incident. The Russians did the same. Germans did that too. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, and I hope that's what a new Alberta looks like. So in conclusion, the only person coming to save you is the version of yourself that's tired of the current situation. And we have a path. We have a path, ladies and gentlemen. That path is here now. It may not always be here. So I'm asking you, please, pay attention to what we're doing, participate in your democracy, come to the AGM, help us out, because if you have not suffered enough, it is your God-given right to suffer more. Thank you.
So we'd like to thank Mr. Sylvestre for his enlightening presentation. Let's give him a hand. There we go. If I can read these. Before we move into a question and answer time, I just have two small announcements. One, there is a merchandise vendor outside who was missed, and he's selling bumper stickers and flags. And he is also hosting rallies on Saturdays on the overpasses at 12:30 to 3:30. So if you'd like to know more about that, feel free to go outside and look for Donnie. Secondly, anyone who is double parked, we've been asked that anyone who's double parked, if you could go and please move your vehicles. So feel free to get up there and run out there and move your vehicle. Right on. Now, if you don't mind, we'll move into our question and answer time, right? We got some good questions here, and I'd like to get through as many of them as possible. We are over time, so we'll see what Catherine, when she cuts me off. Did you just want to make a comment?
So, just to start off, I want you to know that Jeff Rath is not feeling well, and so he's headed back to the hotel. So it'll be Mitch and I answering a few questions. And in the interest of time as well, we're not going to be able to get to all of the questions that have been posed, but what we can do is answer any questions that we've not already answered. If you go to the website, the albertaprosperityproject.com website, there's a section called Frequently Asked Questions, and there's hundreds of questions that have been posed that have been answered. So it's very likely that any questions that have been posed tonight have already been answered. But we'll go through a few of them right now. So here's a question for those on the fence. So the question comes, can you elaborate on how a yes vote during the referendum is vital for a leverage tool against Ottawa, even if the person still wants to remain in Canada? So and that's a good question. So I guess the point really is a yes vote for Alberta sovereignty gives the provincial government the opportunity to negotiate either a better deal within Canada, because that could be the outcome, even though the referendum is asking for sovereignty, Alberta becoming a sovereign country. The second thing that could happen, which is possible but less likely, is Alberta could become, subsequent to a successful referendum on sovereignty, could become a sovereign country, and then Canada could make a proposal to Alberta to come back into Canada. But under those circumstances, if we were already free from federal regulation and taxation, why would we do it? But here's the point that I think is even more relevant for people that are sitting on the fence. A lot of people feel as though they're emotionally attached to Canada, that they love Canada. And that's true. It is the case. But you have to ask yourself this question. Are you more emotionally attached, and do you love Canada more than you love your family? Because in the current situation and the way things are going, you will not be able to look after your family as well if we remain in this current situation. So you have to think about, what is the benefit to you and your family for Alberta becoming a sovereign country as opposed to remaining in Canada? And I think if you have an opportunity to review the Value of Freedom document, I think you'll be quite impressed with the benefit that will accrue. So that would be the answer to the question, I think.
If we become sovereign and we are sitting on a gold mine of oil, how do we defend ourselves with no military? Well, we would have to build our own. And the way to do that is the Swiss actually train every 17-year-old male to become a soldier. It takes a year or two, and then they send them home with their automatic weapon. And we will have enough money it's in our plan, it's in our business plan, that we would have funding for military somewhere in the neighborhood of $3.5 to $4 billion a year. So we would defend ourselves. You can also hire that out. You could make a deal with the U.S. to protect us, and that's doable. And is there a plan to establish a defense system? It's part of our plan. There absolutely is. Okay, one more question, because I think everybody's ready to go home. Go ahead.
All right, I'm going to deal with a question that has come up because we've seen rhetoric from the Indigenous population, particularly First Nations, that ostensibly seem opposed to Alberta becoming a sovereign country. What we know from that Value of Freedom document and what is on our website in terms of Indigenous policy, and as well what is in that Value of Freedom document on the Indigenous section, was contributed to by First Nations chiefs as well. So not all First Nations chiefs feel the same way. And there are many First Nations chiefs that have tribes, nations, individuals that are really severely compromised. And let me give you the best example of what I'm talking about here. The average life expectancy for all of us, non-Indigenous people, is 82 years. That's the average life expectancy. The average life expectancy for First Nations people is 19 years less. Think about that. So why is that? There's a lot of reasons why it is the case, but the root problem is the way the federal government has handled First Nations and created a culture of dependency on the federal government. That's a fundamental problem, and there's an opportunity to get them out of poverty in a sovereign Alberta. And many First Nations chiefs and many First Nations individuals and other Indigenous people, Métis as well, understand that. So don't be hoodwinked into thinking that First Nations are going to block the progress of Alberta becoming a sovereign country. So although I'd love to stay and answer many more questions, I know it is getting late. And so with that, I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my cardiac surgical heart that you're all here tonight. And on behalf of Mitch and Jeff and all of our volunteers and all of the 20,000 volunteers that we have, we are grateful that you are the first people in Edmonton per se to come to an APP event. So spread the word, because we'll be having other events. Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll take the questions, because any that are not answered, we'll answer. There we go.
There you go.
All right, thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. That was really great. You guys are awesome.
Thank you very much. You did a great job.
Thanks.
You set an example looking very down. We're not quite, I didn't have a time. I think so, but any case, it was a pretty good event.
Yeah, you guys are great.
Anyhow,
It was a great meeting. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Have a great day. Thank you.
And just out of curiosity, we have around 600 people watching online, aside from the 300 people who are here. .600 people online on all platforms combined, YouTube, Facebook. So 350 on on YouTube, 150 on X, Facebook were about 70, and the other farmers like combined across each other.